morning, everyone, and welcome to my 12th and 13th day of my Reduce Waste Challenge. I am very excited to report that my worms came in the mail. Now, they came in the mail right when I was leaving for school for my test yesterday, so that means I had to get their house set up last night when I got in from school. So unfortunately, I don't have any footage of me setting up my vermicompost, but I am going to show you what I did and explain how to set up your compost. So right here I have my vermicomposting bin. I'm actually going to be storing my compost in my basement so that it's relatively out of sight, and it, if any sort of smell leaks out, which it shouldn't if I do this correctly, the smell will be relatively isolated. My vermicompost bin was constructed using two different bins, a shallow, wide bin and a tall, deep bin. The bottom bin does not have any holes drilled into it. Its purpose is to catch anything that comes out of the vermicompost bin. You can see at the bottom here, I drilled 1/8 inch holes. Also, I want to give a major shout out to my dad who got out of bed late last night to help me drill these holes into the bins. I was completely screwing up how to attach the drill attachments and how to do it, and I just was having a ton of trouble. And he was kind enough to get out of bed and help me, even though he was already really tired. So shout out to you. We actually drilled 6 holes, 1 on each corner of this bin, and then 1 here in the center. We also drilled 1-inch holes on either side of the wide end of the taller bin. You probably noticed that those holes were covered with screening. That screening was made of fiberglass because metal would rust in the presence of water. I was going to use super glue, but I actually decided to use my hot glue gun because I'm less afraid of using hot glue, it's easier to use, and hot glue is waterproof. The reason everything needs to be waterproof is because the worm bedding needs to be kept quite moist. The purpose of this larger hole is to allow the worms to breathe, and the purpose of the smaller holes is to allow the water to drain out so the worms do not drown. Now it's daytime, so my worms are hiding, but I made this bedding using shredded paper and some dirt. It's important not to use any paper that has dye on it, like colored dye, or glossy paper. And I used about 1 pound of dirt, so the combination of the paper and the dirt reaches about 3 inches of depth. To get this bin to the appropriate degree of moisture, you want it to be wet and soft, but not like puddles, so akin to a damp sponge. I ended up using 5 cups of water. So I'm disappointed that I couldn't show you guys the process of actually building the vermicompost bin. It's really unfortunate I wasn't filming myself because I have this really irrational fear of worms. I don't know why I have that fear, there's no reason for it. It's super irrational, and trying to get over that fear is pretty comical. Quick lesson on phobias and various anxiety disorders. In layman's terms, the only way to get over a phobia or something related to anxiety is to expose yourself to the fear and basically get over it. Some fears are healthy, such as a fear of heights, because from an evolutionary perspective, you could fall and die. Same thing with fears of snakes. They can bite you and hurt you. But if your fear is so serious that it's getting in the way of your ability to function, then it's a problem. Now, up until now, I've never had like a reason to get over my fear of worms. So now I'm like, I want to do this composting bin. It's easy. I don't have to turn it. I'm gonna have to get over my fear. Now, I know that it's a legitimate fear because one of the worms had gotten out of the enclosure when I was setting it up, and I came back in the room and I stopped like dead in my tracks and turned into a statue, and all my muscles tightened up and my heart rate went up and my breathing went up, and I had a very physiological response to the worm. When the worm was removed from the situation, everything relaxed. I could feel it physically go down. So it's kind of interesting on a physiological level, my reaction to worms. Now, the way to get over that is just to deal with the worms. Exposure to your fear, and then seeing that the world doesn't end when you're exposed to the fear, nothing really bad happens, is how one can extinguish phobic reactions. So I'm getting there, but give me some time, because it's reasonable to give somebody, a little bit of time to get over the fear. But back on composting. Let's see if I can find my wormies, which is, of course, requiring me to touch them. It's funny because I'm actually already very maternal to these worms. yet I fear them. So I think that's a big improvement already. Now I'm gonna try to touch them, because if I touch them, I think that I'll get over my fear. In psychology, we have a treatment called systematic desensitization, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You systematically, meaning in steps, desensitize, meaning remove the sensitivity, a person to his or her fear. And once the person confronts their top tier fear, such as in this case for me, I think it would be having to touch the worms, they get over it. So let's do this. Okay, wormies. It's funny because my body's actually like shaking, and it's pathetic. I want to get over this fear. Okay, I saw him. There's a worm. Oh, there it is. Here's my wormies. All right, this is a big step for me, by the way, guys, because I just touched that worm and I didn't freak out. Now, they're actually pretty cute, and it's good to see them all rehydrating, because when they come packed to you, I was reading the worm instructions, they've been jostled around and they haven't had food for a couple days, so they're not real happy. I'm gonna try to touch them again. Now that I know what the worm feels like, I'm less afraid. It's funny how anxiety disorders and phobias work. They're very physiological. Okay, now I feel bad because my poor worms are trying to sleep and they don't like the light, and I'm making them get out and like be on top of my hand. Oh God, it's moving. Okay, now they're hiding from me because they don't want to be in the sunlight. Oops. Okay. Oh, I can feel it. Oh God, oh God. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. I touched you. I feel good about myself. So this is just a little PSA for those of you who don't know how anxiety disorders and phobias work. When you're like, get over it, it's just a worm. I'm shaking and having a physical reaction to this. I have no reason for it, it's completely irrational, and I'm forcing myself to get over it, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And I feel tremendous pride for having run at my fear. So also a PSA, if you have any fears in life where you're having a reaction like I'm having, try confronting them. You'll feel better, you'll feel proud of yourself. Okay, I think I've upset my little wormies enough. I'm going to take them to the other room so I can feed them tonight. Vermicompost instructions indicate to give the worms about a day to get used to their bedding. Then you can feed them. Now I have all these food scraps that I've been collecting since I started my zero waste challenge, and I'm gonna feed my wormies when I get in from school tonight because that will have given them a full day to adjust to their new housing. Now before I take a break in my composting information, I want to show you guys what happened to the butt of the bok choy that I made last week. Look at that, my bok choy's regrowing. Isn't that exciting? My leftover food scraps from the bok choy frittata I made are gonna feed my little wormies, and the butt end of it is gonna grow into more bok choy for me. So at this point, we're gonna take a brief break, and I will check back in when I get home from school tonight and show you how to feed your worms in your vermicompost. See you tonight! Hey guys, we're back to feed the worms. I've got Ari with me. So it's been officially 24 hours since I set up my worms in their new house, and that means they're probably really hungry.
So we're gonna feed them.
To feed your worms, the first thing you want to do is create a hole in the bedding. You can use a trowel, or you can use your hands. And I'm gonna use my hands because I'm trying to get over my fear of worms. Okay, create a hole. Hello, my worms. After creating a hole in the bedding, you want to fill it with some of your spare shredded paper. Now I'm going to take my food scraps, put them on top of the paper, and then cover it with some more dirt and paper. So as you can see, we've got some asparagus and bok choy from the frittata I made. I've got some onion, some potato skins. I've got some carrot skins from something else I made, some broccoli stems that I cut up. And now we're gonna cover all of the food scraps with the paper and the dirt. It's very important to cover all of the food scraps because it could attract fruit flies and other various bugs. Because everything needs to be so moist, I'm going to add some additional water to the pile. I'm going to add some more paper to the worm bin so that my worms have plenty of bedding.
And of course, more water.
Okay, close up my wormies. Now we're going to take my worms downstairs. My wormies! So I'm going to keep them here tentatively until my parents are like, oh no, put it here instead. But this is a good spot for now because it's still real clean, like it hasn't gotten leaky yet. So we'll check back on the wormies tomorrow and see what they're eating, what they're not eating, whether they're eating at all, whether it's too wet, too dry, and just generally keep an eye on the health of the compost bin. Composting is an eco-friendly use for your leftover kitchen food scraps. The compost product that the worms produce is highly nutritious and beneficial for your plants. So if you're opting to grow a garden of any capacity, maybe even just for your lawn, you can use the compost to strengthen your crops. Every summer, my dad and I grow a garden, and we're actually growing hot peppers just on our back deck this year. So we need lots of compost. I hope you guys enjoyed a documentation of my much anticipated composting journey. See you next time!